Discipleship is not always clearly understood. Fortunately, Jesus' most famous teaching on discipleship paints a clear picture of the discipling essentials. These essentials can help us as we look to initiate those who respond to the gospel into an ongoing life of discipleship right alongside us. First, let's go to Jesus' words in the Great Commission, Matthew chapter 28, verses 16 through 20. Now the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain to which Jesus had directed them. And when they saw him, they worshipped, but some doubted. And Jesus came and said to them, All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always, to the end of the age. So here's Jesus' picture of the essentials of discipleship from the Great Commission. First, discipleship is for everyone. Jesus commissions every disciple, even the doubters, to go and make disciples of everyone else. So discipleship and disciple-making is not just for superstars or professionals. It's not just for outrageously holy people. It's for everyone. All disciples are to make disciples of everyone else. And what kind of life does Jesus imagine for us as his disciples? Jesus describes discipleship as a life on the go, or as we go. Although this distinction doesn't translate well into English, the word go in this passage is not used in the sense of leaving where you are to go somewhere else. So Jesus is not saying, go somewhere else and make disciples. He is saying, as you go, make disciples. Which brings us to another discipling essential. Disciples must be made. Discipleship does not happen spontaneously. It is not an automatic result of hearing the gospel and repenting. It is a process that takes time and commitment and intentionality. Here's a simple way to remember the process of how Jesus made disciples so that we can make disciples the same way. First, anything Jesus wanted the disciples to be doing or saying, he first modeled for them. They heard and they saw before they were asked to do. Next, Jesus assisted. Even when he was there alongside the disciples and he could obviously say and do everything better than they could, he invited them into the action anyway. And Jesus was right there with them in case they needed help. Very quickly though, as recorded many times in the Gospels, Jesus also deployed the disciples. He sent them out, often 2 by 2, without him, to keep doing the same things that they had first seen Jesus do and practiced themselves alongside him. And then, when the disciples returned, Jesus would gather them together in order to debrief their mission and their experiences. Finally, before his ascension, Jesus entrusted the whole gospeling, disciple-making, peace-bringing mission into the hands of those that he had himself discipled. That's how Jesus made disciples, and that's how we must make disciples. Modeling, assisting, deploying and debriefing, and finally entrusting the disciple-making process from one generation of disciples to the next. And now, back to Matthew chapter 28 for the final two aspects of the discipling essentials. First, discipleship is a life of abiding in Jesus. Jesus includes a graphic illustration of this in our passage. The word baptism literally means immersed. So Jesus literally says here that disciples are to be immersed in God, immersed in Jesus, immersed in the Holy Spirit. Of course, this immersion begins with water baptism, but that's just the beginning of a new life immersed in the presence of God wherever we go and whatever we're doing. Jesus repeats this idea in the last phrase of Matthew chapter 28, saying this, I am with you always. So discipleship is not a task or a life we undertake on our own. It is a life with Jesus, a life immersed in Jesus. Jesus' own word for this kind of life, taken from John chapter 15, is abiding. And finally, discipleship is a life of obedience. Jesus' commission was not to teach as in inform or educate. His instructions were specifically to teach other disciples to obey. And where does this obedience begin? With the discipling essentials. As we go, making disciples just like Jesus made disciples, and abiding in Jesus always and everywhere. So again, the discipling essentials as they come to us from Jesus and the Great Commission. Discipleship is for everyone. Discipling happens as we go. Disciples must be made the same way that Jesus made disciples. Discipleship is a life of abiding in God, and in all this, discipleship is a life of obedience to King Jesus. Now, get with a partner and practice training each other back and forth until you both have the confidence and competence to go out and train others in the discipling essentials as they come to us from Matthew chapter 28.